Welcome back to Wrestling Pages with Max Page and Chris Russell. Today we have, or tonight, this evening, we have Kim Drisdale, Sean Kennedy, and Ryan Murphy here speaking about MUNSU stuff. And now we have Sean. Sean Kennedy has been involved with kind of student-related activities since he got here. He started with Engineers Without Borders and is now currently still involved as the president of Engineers Without Borders. He's the director with the Rad Hawk Society. He's been a science rep for 2 years on the board, volunteers with leadership societies, committees. He sits on the Senate course evaluations, the university timetable, the Faculty of Science Committee, and the Senate. And he, in the past, has sat on the Senate of Undergraduate Studies. He also works with the Board of Regents Selections Committee and Reviews Committee of the Dean of Science. Sean, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
Sean, you seem to take on pretty high-profile roles. I'm sorry I kind of maybe butchered that intro.
No, it's all good.
A little bit. So Sean is the Executive Director of Advocacy, like I said. Could you describe the position? It seems to be something that doesn't get as much PR as the others.
Yeah, sure. So I kind of grouped the role in kind of 3 different areas. The first one's like making sure that students are being treated fairly by like the university or whatever, and making sure that they're having the best possible experience here at MUN. As well as making sure that they're being represented fairly, like students as a whole, they're being represented, whether it's on Senate committees, like you brought up, or in other bodies. And then the third one is making sure that our general concerns are being heard by the university administration as well.
Cool. So for next year, when you're Executive Director of Advocacy come May 1st, what are some of your biggest initiatives or goals, I guess? What might you want to emphasize?
And you could touch on the campaigns that.
Yeah, sure. So there's actually some really interesting work just getting started now on mental health issues on campus. There's going to be a panel. It was supposed to be this week, but because of the snowstorm, it got moved. So it's happening, I believe it's Tuesday, I'm pretty sure. So I'm super excited to build on the work that's going to start there. I think that it's definitely becoming a growing concern here on campus, and it's definitely impacting students both inside and outside the classroom as well. The other thing is, when I was going around getting my nomination signatures, a lot of students didn't know what the Director of Advocacy did, which I also find incredibly concerning, because if they don't know that I'm here, it's really hard for me to reach out and be able to help them.
Definitely.
So I guess making sure over the next year that like this role does gain like a higher profile and people are more aware of the fact that like it does exist, as well as making sure that the reps we send out to sit on Senate committees or whatever committees in the university to make sure that they're good student reps. So I'm planning on doing a little bit of like hands-on like training with all of them, kind of like a boot camp.
And
Nice.
before we get into, we're going to talk about the university structure and kind of talk about what Sean means when he talks about representation and stuff like that. But before that, would you be just willing to talk to us about the transition period, maybe what you've learned from the current executive and what you want to kind of embody as you go forward with the position?
Sure thing. I guess with working with Ashley this year and then Candace the year previous when she was in the position, I've learned that it's not an easy position whatsoever. You're often put in a lot of difficult situations where students are like might end up getting kicked out of school, getting kicked out of their house, or not really knowing where to turn. And I also learned that the university is pretty complex when it comes to trying to figure out where to go when you have a problem. So I guess using that experience that I've had working with them over the last 2 years, I'll be able to move forward and make sure that students are being helped as much as possible. And I know I've also learned who are the right people to ask the right questions to make sure that students are being helped.
Yeah, so let's talk about those complexities a little bit.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what this question even means.
The complexities of the student structure. I think what we're talking about is the channels and stuff like that. Like when I first came to MUN, I didn't realize how the university operated, and it operates under this kind of committee structure, right?
Yeah.
So could you maybe explain a little bit briefly, if you were talking
Sure.
to old me who has no idea about how these things get processed?
So I'm going to try and not be boring, but it's very like structural. And so what happens is the university is basically, administration is divided in 2. So there's the Board of Regents. They decide like financial stuff and like administrative things like new buildings or passing budgets. And there's also Senate, and they decide more of the academic issues. The problem is that often those things kind of overlap. So sometimes you'll have the Board of Regents being responsible for something as well as Senate. And then Senate also and Board of Regents, they're both broken down into like further committee structures in between that. So as you can see, like already having that kind of setup, it makes navigating those systems super tricky. So it's super important that we as our student representatives like understand how it works so we can help students along the right path.
Yeah, and maybe just if you don't mind giving us a couple examples of because you talked about Senate and Board of Regents, which are pretty high-profile committees, and there's
Yeah.
also kind of some secondary committees, right? Like I sat on education technology.
Yeah, so for sure. So the Senate itself has established a number of like standing committees to address like certain issues. So like I sat on one on course evaluation. So all we do, we meet every so often and we talk about the CEQs and other means of course evaluation at the university. Yeah, like you said, Max, you sat on educational technology. So you're looking at how can the university better use educational technology to help improve its academic programs.
And there's spots reserved for students on all these committees.
Yeah,
as
for
well,
sure.
right?
So thanks to the students who came before us, we've been guaranteed at least one seat on nearly the entirety of all of the committees at the university. So that's been really great, and it makes sure that like our voice is being heard.
So who is it that sits on these committees? Because I mean, MUNSU is obviously, the board is all students, but the Senate and the Board of Regents is kind of like a mix of students, staff, faculty.
Yep.
So what kind of is like the breakdown of the members of these committees?
Sure. Yeah. So we have all of the students' unions have a representative at the Board of Regents. So we have one. They're appointed for a 2-year term. So it's Candace right now.
Right.
So that's done. But for Senate, it's actually super cool. It's open up to the entire student body. There's an application process in the fall. So when you're walking around in the fall, you'll see these posters up. And all you do is you pass in your resume, why you want to do it, in your class schedule. You pass that in, and then we'll all gather some folks together, and we'll sit through and we'll interview people and try and figure out who the best candidates are to represent students. For the other committees, it's usually board members, just because I already have a relationship with them, so it makes reporting back super easy, and it's easier for me to, I guess, tell a board member like, you need to make sure you go to committee meetings than a student who I don't necessarily already have that connection with.
Yeah. And so are there, if a student wasn't able or didn't have the time or whatever to fulfill one of these kind of one of these roles as like the student representative, is there a different degree that students can participate in this process, like maybe more indirectly?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, my goal is to actually have a list like with me of who sits on what committee. So if a student has a particular concern, I can tell them like, look, if you want to talk about this with the person who's going to be representing you, here is the person, so you should go talk to them. So using that kind of approach, so like letting the student reps also be open to like the student body as a whole and making that process a bit more transparent.
Yeah, and it's wild. Just my experience subbing in on the Senate, I had the opportunity to speak to the student code of conduct.
Yeah.
Like, and I was basically in a position where if I wanted to, now I didn't, I could have put my hand up and commented on the student code of conduct. And I personally have had some run-ins with the student code of conduct, particularly when I was living in residence.
Yeah.
So it was unbelievable, almost surreal that I found myself in a position where I could articulate the interests I could personally, or the interests that I've heard from other people. So I mean, it's kind of, and it really kind of contextualized what MUNSU does as well too, when you realize that connection they have with the administration. So
I guess next we'll talk about there's an advocacy committee, right? The specific
yeah. So maybe
advocacy
looking back
committee,
into MUNSU.
Yeah, back into MUNSU. What when you're on we were talking about those committees, but on your kind of your baby committee, what are some of your goals for next year with the advocacy committee?
I guess the biggest one is to have them kind of be like, have their ears open for problems that they're hearing from students and bring them back. I found that from the advocacy committee this year, that's when we were most effective, when we'd bring back things that we've heard from either our faculties or our constituencies, that we could bring back and be like, hey, like students in business are having a problem with this, and students in education are having a problem with this. And oftentimes you'll find that problems are overlapping, but because they're in separate faculties, that like people might not be aware of the fact that those issues exist in both.
Right.
The other thing is making sure that we have good student representation, and that people are generally happy with the directions that we're pushing when it comes to talking to the administration.
And it seems sometimes our union takes on campaigns that kind of spin off of these potential
Exactly, for sure.
advocacy issues and stuff like that.
Yep.
So we talked a little bit about the committees. Do you have any goals set for yourself? You talked about creating like a line of communication between university reps and their student body and stuff like that. Do you have any other goals like that you are trying to kind of institutionalize throughout your year?
Yeah, for sure. I want to make sure, my biggest thing is honestly is making sure that people know that the Director of Advocacy is there and that the Students' Union is there to help them. I think if I can even make some progress towards that, and I think part of it is going to have to be me leaving the office and holding office hours in other locations other than my actual physical office in the UC, because we represent students at the Center for Nursing Studies or over at Health Sciences, or students that are on work terms. So I'm going to have to be I guess I think I'm gonna have to be a bit more flexible in making sure that I'm approachable to students.
Yeah, really available. True.
Yeah.
True. So I guess now we've got only like a couple minutes left before
Yep.
we gotta finish off with Ryan. So
With Sean. Oh, finish off. Okay,
finish,
sorry.
finish the show off with Ryan is what I mean. So now
Radio listeners.
it's
up?
this question would probably have been at least a bit better suited for Robert, but I mean advocacy, student advocacy works with it too. But the budget hadn't come out when we had him on the show, so provincial budget, big win for the whole education is a right movement, student movement in general. So I mean, you're obviously involved. So can you kind of talk about that big win for the movement?
Yeah, so it's definitely a massive win. And I think that one, I know for me, came a little bit unexpected. I wasn't really expecting it to be in this budget at all.
No.
So for anyone that doesn't know, which is probably a few of you, basically what's been happened is that the provincial student loan system is actually being entirely replaced with an upfront needs-based grant. So what that means is that when you get a student loan now, there's a federal portion and there's a provincial portion. So that provincial portion is going to become a non-repayable grant, so you will never actually have to pay back the money that you're given from that provincial portion. It's given to you. So it's been a long battle for sure, and it's taken a good few years of work, but I was super glad to see it happen.
Yeah, no, it's excellent.
Yeah, and it's something that we've advocated for at a local level and is being advocated for all across the country.
And it's been super cool because we saw the day after the next announcement, Nova Scotia came out with another announcement about their student loan program.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So
what is it?
I've
No
seen it's
interest
been
in
making waves all across the country, which I think is super impressive.
So if you could just kind of, I mean, I don't want to say speculate, but look into the future a little bit. Where do you see the campaign going, and how do we continue to articulate the interests of the students and apply pressure and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I think that it's really important that despite the fact that, yes, we have upfront needs-based grants to the provincial portion, that still doesn't exist at the federal level, and I think that's something that we should start pushing more as well. The other thing is that the tuition freeze is never actually a guarantee for more than a couple of years, so we need to make sure that, like, fees are frozen, and then we also look at progressively reducing tuition fees as well and making sure that our system of post-secondary education becomes the most accessible as possible.
And that being said, there's probably a lot of kind of thanks to all the players who kind of got this going. So I tried to do it last episode, actually. I tried to do this big thanks to, like, all these people. So, like, if there was a group of people, like, if we were going to celebrate this victory, who would we want to celebrate it with? Like, who are the big players?
I really think that it's been a victory of, I would say, nearly every single student that's been in the post-secondary education system in Newfoundland and Labrador over the last number of years, because they were the ones that listened to us and signed the petition, that sent the emails, that sent the postcards, as well as obviously the people that helped organize those campaigns. And I think that it's like a huge pat on the back for everyone all around for what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
there's actually a little event happening tomorrow, isn't there? Do you
There
want to give a
is.
little shameless plug for that?
Yeah, there's an event happening tomorrow in the UC. I think it's 1:45 or 12:30. 1:45? 1 p.m., sorry, in the UC. Yeah, we're going to have a party to celebrate the fact that provincial student loans are no more and that grants are the new way to go.
I heard it might be a pizza party.
I heard there's pizza too, and I heard there's
pizza.
candy.
Pizza party. Sweet. Okay, so that's where we're gonna probably cut you off now. Sorry to cut you short, Sean.
No, it's totally fine.
So we're gonna move into Ryan. So we're gonna do a little bit of rustling around here to situate Ryan. But is there anything you'd like to say before you get off the
Kind
air?
of the last word.
Yeah, sure. So if anyone ever has any problem with a professor, with a course, with an instructor, with an RA, with an RC, with anyone, I'm here to help you. So please drop by and see me. I'm in UC 2000. I start May 1st. Ashley Wilson's there now to help you out until then. So yeah, that's basically it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot,
So,
Sean.
thanks a lot, Sean.
That's great.